Okay, this one's already live, so we can start whenever. Hey guys, this one's live, so we're good.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready, Johnny.
Okay. Okay. All right, you guys ready?
Yep.
Okay. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Banana Stand Pod. It's our 12th episode, and we have the usual gang here. We have Mike Liu, we have Kenny Chang, and we have Ray Liu behind the scenes. Today, we're going to talk about NFL trade deadline and stuff, according to our Google spreadsheet. So first, we're going to lead off with the Houston Texans and that big trade with the Cleveland Browns, where we saw Brock Osweiler move on in order for the Texans to get some cap space. So we're going to go around the room and find out our thoughts on, the Texans getting the salary cap space and moving on and giving up on Brock after just 1 year. Mike, what do you have to say about it?
I like it for both teams, actually. For the Browns, it's pretty savvy because they have a ton of cap space that they weren't going to hit anyways. And they're not really in a place to contend right now. I think right now they're throwing darts at the board and trying to see which players will stick in the long term. And they managed to pick up, really move up in picks simply for taking Brock's salary. And for the Texans, I like it because I know Kenny and Ray, you guys were high on Brock. I don't think he's good. I think he's basically the new Jake Locker minus the injuries. He's tall. He looks good. He has an arm, but he can't play football or he can't hit his targets. And so I think the Texans, they get a lot of cap space. If they want to go for Tony Romo or really if they just want to pick up high impact players at other positions, this really gives them the latitude to do so. And I also like it because traditionally you don't see a lot of financial based trades in the NFL or trades to really manipulate cap space or picks and things like that. This is kind of taking it in that direction, more like the NBA. So I think it's more sophisticated. And I like it for the sport of football.
I'll start with the Texans side because I think this is a side that's a lot more clear on how they benefited. The Texans team is amazing from top to bottom. And the only issue with this team last year that kept them from making a deep playoff run was the QB position. So they're admitting they made a mistake, moving on from Brock Osweiler and trying to find someone new. I hope that's Tony Romo because that'd be an amazing team, but we'll see. But overall, it's pretty clear from the Texans why they did this, how they benefit, and what they do next. It's just a great move from them. And it was a very unique trade, so I love it from the Texans. For the Browns side, I also love it. So overall, I think this is just an incredible trade for both sides. A lot of people are saying that Brock Osweiler is not worth $16 million, and I agree with that. He's not worth $16 million. But what is he worth? I think that's the bigger question. Do you look at him as a backup QB? And other teams, what are they paying for a backup QB? Like $8 million, $9 million, somewhere around there? Do you think he's worth that at least? And that means that the Browns are basically paying around $8 million for a second round pick. And I think that alone is very worth it. So from the Browns' perspective, it's looking to the future. You have the room to take on Osweiler for now. And if you really want to, you can just throw him in as a backup QB. And he's obviously not worth $16 million, but you're getting so much in return for taking him on that it's just a great deal for the Browns.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think this is kind of like, I don't think it's an A or A plus deal for either of them, but it's more like a C plus or B-ish deal where you see the Texans need that space. They're moving on they have a solid they have a great defense, and they just need a quarterback as their missing piece. And they knew Brock wasn't going to get it done. So they moved on quickly instead of giving him another chance. And for the Browns, you get the second rounder for basically low risk, just taking on money that they need to spend anyway. So, I think it's like a solid deal for both teams, and one that we really rarely see in the NFL. And so it's a win-win, but it seems like a bigger deal than it actually is. I think, like, unless the Texans definitely get Romo out of this eventually, it's not going to move the needle for either team. So, but good job, Browns, good job, Texans.
You know who's the biggest winner of this deal, though? John Elway. He tried to pay Brock Osweiler. The Texans decided to pay him more. Man, that was a huge bullet dodge by John Elway and the Broncos.
Definitely agree with that. That's a good point. You forget, but now they're going to be competing for Romo probably with the Texans. Let's just jump right in there. If you were Tony Romo, and you see the landscape of the NFL, and let's say he had his choice of where to go, where would you go?
If I was Tony Romo, I think I'd go with the Texans. I feel like that's a stronger team overall. I don't know. I guess it's harder to say for the Broncos because that team just looked like a complete mess last year. And it wasn't just the QB position. Whereas with the Texans, it's very clear how strong the team is except for that one position.
Yeah, I agree with Kenny. I think the Texans are the clear-cut winner. The only other team that would really be in contention from a championship contention standpoint would be the Broncos, and I don't think they're as complete as the Texans. I think they have questions on their running game. Their defense was very highly vaunted, but this year they weren't as good as they were in the Super Bowl year, which makes sense. Defenses are harder to keep intact because you need all 11 guys to really be performing. They have talent at wide receiver. I think their offensive line, I've heard they have some questions there. And I think if you think about it just from a personal standpoint, you would have to think that Tony Romo is going to get a warmer reception in staying in Texas, right? Playing in Houston rather than in Denver. He won't have to move his family. Just the small things like that, I think, make Houston the better choice for him.
It seems at the end of the day, Romo is basically going to be able to pick where he wants to go. Since the Cowboys, they're not able to trade him, they said to Romo, we're not going to send you somewhere unless you actually want to go there. So it's clear that Jerry Jones and the rest of the front office of the Cowboys really respect Romo as they should. So Romo has a whole lot to say here. He basically has his choice of where he wants to go.
To be fair, though, let's say Denver comes to Elway and they say, we're not going to give you a king's ransom for Romo, but we'll toss you a 5th round pick or a 6th round pick. And the Houstons don't come to the table with anything, right? Do you think Jerry Jones does that trade? Even if Romo has a preference for Houston?
I don't think they do. I feel like you can't destroy your reputation with Romo. You have to do it as he wishes. He has so much power over the Cowboys that I just don't think they do.
Well, he has power from a public media and a public perception, kind of a goodwill standpoint. He doesn't actually have any leverage as a player, right? He doesn't have a no trade clause. He doesn't have anything like that.
Right, but the front office understands that their reputation is tied to what Romo wants, and if they do something that he doesn't like, then that's going to hurt them very, very badly.
So maybe a 5th or 6th round pick wouldn't be enough to get it done. But let's say the Jets or some shitty team comes to the table and they say, hey, we're going to give you a 3rd round pick for Tony Romo.
I feel like that already happened, and the Cowboys turned it down because the Cowboys have already said that they've received tons of offers from other teams and that they're not willing to do a deal unless Romo wants to go. So it seems that any non-contenders are already instantly out. and I would include Jets as a non-contender. In case
Bold take. Yeah,
Or Jets.
I think they need to do. I'm kind of in the middle of both of you guys, because while I agree, they should do what's good for Tony Romo and what he wants. We rarely see that in the NFL, and the fans don't even care that much for some reason. Like, the NFL fans don't care. Like, they understand business is business. You see, players right in their primes just have to be cut, and the fans kind of understand why, for salary cap reasons or whatever. If the Jets offer a 3rd round pick, I'd be if I were Jerry Jones, I would do it, absolutely. You have Dak Prescott, and you don't need Romo, and you don't really need to maintain goodwill with him. I don't think you should have to. I think you have to do what's best for the team, and you want to win a championship. So
I think it's I think it's a little in between. I think Tony Romo, I agree with you, Johnny, that generally speaking, NFL teams don't really care too much about goodwill with players. I do think Tony Romo and quarterbacks in general, they're kind of a special case because they, they're really the face of the team for, in Tony Romo's case, about a decade, right? And he's been such a reliable keystone player for them that I think they would get some sort of backlash, but I know there are a lot of fans that are kind of split. Some have that allegiance to Romo and some don't. I think it would really depend on the offer. I don't think they're going to get a 3rd round for Tippett for Tony Romo, so I do think he's going to end up in Houston.
Yeah. Ray, would you agree?
Somewhere good.
Ray, what team is Tony Romo going to play for next year?
So I'm having him for the Texans. And I mostly agree with Kenny, I believe, where Tony Romo, he may have no leverage, but he's the face of a franchise for 10 years. He's going to have to come back for the 20-year anniversaries, 30-year anniversaries. He's going to be in there, the Ring of Honor, and quite frankly, Jerry Jones loves Tony so much, and he's the owner, GM, and he's going to do right by Tony.
Right, that's how I see it. Like, he carried this awful team for so long. He took so many injuries for them, just absolutely destroyed his body.
Jerry Jones loves Tony Romo. Tony goes over for dinner once a week.
Well, yeah. So I guess we'll see what happens, but I think we all agree that the favored team is the Texans. So moving on, we're not going to hit every single free agent move, obviously, but we're going to do a little deep dive into first the New York Giants and all their moves. We had Brandon Marshall. We re-signed JPP. Recently signed Geno Smith, and various other moves. So overall, I would say Giants are one of the biggest winners in free agency. What do you think, Kenny? We'll start with you.
I agree. This is a pretty big win for the Giants. As we all know, the Giants spent heavily last year in free agency, especially on the defensive side, and that turned our defense from one of the worst in the league to one of the best. So we've been doing really well. I think Jerry Reese had made some great moves, but I actually kind of question the Brandon Marshall move. It's not that much. It's $12 million over 2 years, so $6 million per year. Not a huge move for a top tier wide receiver, but I question what he actually brings at this age. I feel like he's on the decline. This guy has been known consistently as being a huge locker room problem. He's played on 5 teams now? 5 teams in how many years? And despite being one of the best wide receivers in the league, he just keeps moving around, bouncing around from team to team because it seems like teams always have problems with him. So he brings a big body to the wide receiver group, which we do need, but at the same time, I'm kind of concerned about bringing on Brandon Marshall.
What do you think, Mike?
So I agree with Kenny overall in that I don't think. Well, let me just start overall with how I think we did. I would give the overall moves, B. I think they're okay. They're not great. And I don't think that it's fair to say that they've been the winners of free agency. Like, if you look at the names, on paper, they look good, right? Brandon Marshall, JPP, Geno Smith as a backup. Cool. I mean, Geno Smith as a backup is perfectly fine. Let's be real. He's not. I mean, I don't think he's going to be a franchise quarterback, but in the role of backup, you look around the backup position around the league, and there are a lot of no-name guys who really aren't qualified to step in and play at all. Geno's at least had some production as a starter, but I don't want to get tied down to Geno Smith. I actually like the Brandon Marshall move. I don't see a lot of the concerns that Kenny does. I do think if you were holding on to him for a long-term deal or for big money, that would be a point of concern. But he's only getting 2 years, $12 million, and only $5 million of that is guaranteed. So basically, it's a 1-year trial. If it works, great. We have him for another year on a cheap deal. And if it doesn't work, we can just cut him next season. I think there's virtually no dead cap associated with him. And I think he steps in. He brings that big body that Eli really likes. We had a lot of issues with really moving the ball. And part of that was because the offensive line. But another part is just you had Cruz, you had Odell, you had what's his name? Shepard. And they're all, Shepard and Odell, I think they're in their primes, they're quick, but they're small guys, right? It's really timing based, and they need to make clean breaks to get separation. Brandon Marshall can just reach up and get the ball. So I like that aspect, and Eli's had a lot of chemistry with tall receivers in the past. The deal that I'm actually not entirely sold on is JPP. So he's getting paid $62 million over 4 years. $40 million of that is guaranteed, which is a huge amount of money for a guy that should be in his prime. And I don't think he's really performed at the level of this contract. He's very good against the run. He generates some pressure against the pass, but the past 2 years, past 3 years, really, he hasn't generated sacks, right? And I know pressures are nice. They're the new hot stat, but pressures don't end plays, right? If you pressure Tom Brady, he can still get off a 12-yard pass for a first down. It's kind of a pseudo stat in my mind. And it's a lot of money to be paying to a guy when we have Odell that's going to need to get re-signed pretty soon. And I don't think he's a game changer. It's simple as that. For $15 million average a season, you need to get like a tier 2 guy, not a Von Miller, but just a step below. And JPP is several steps below.
Overall, I think both of the moves are kind of like a C for me. I think the money could have been better spent elsewhere is really what the next step to, I think, your point, Mike, is that the money, I mean, like with JPP, it's fine that we brought back JPP, but he was way too expensive. 40 million guaranteed is a little too pricey. But to Brandon Marshall, I think, while he can provide that veteran leadership almost, I don't know, like, can he even provide that veteran leadership? He can provide the stability on the field where he can kind of fit that Anquan Bolden type mold for Eli. But I would have rather spent that money, it's not a lot of money, but I would have rather spent it on upgrading the offensive line or finding a better running back, right? Is there anyone that replaced Rashad Jennings yet?
Perkins, so I think Perkins is going to be the guy this year. Or they're guy.
I feel like he's.
But still, I know Kenny loves Rashad, so that's like, I would have liked to have, replaced him over kind of it's a risk bringing back Marshall, and who knows? He could definitely clash with Cruz, and none of us would be surprised, right? They're both divas on the field, so and in the locker room. So overall, I think the Giants did well. They got some names, but are they competing with the Cowboys now? We don't. It's hard to say. I still think they're a step below them.
I just think the big question mark of this deal is Brandon Marshall. I really don't know what this brings.
Yeah.
I mean, on paper, it's very clear what it brings, but I mean, in terms of personalities, I think it's a huge concern.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll move on to the rich get richer with the Patriots. And their various moves. They re-signed Dante Hightower. They got Brandon Cooks, and I don't know, just fucking depressing. What do you guys think?
It's fucking depressing. I don't know how they keep getting away with it. It's
Belichick.
Teams are making it too easy for the Patriots. Like, I get everyone is their own self-serving party, but you gotta like especially the trades. So I think the overall signings, they re-signed Dante Hightower, they signed Stephon Gilmore, but they traded for Brandon Cooks and Coney Iali. Cooks was for the terms of that deal were a first and a third for Cooks and a fourth. The Patriots keep in mind the Patriots are picking at the very end, so the first and the third they're pretty late. Basically, it's a first and move back a bit for Brandon Cooks. I do think Cooks is a little overrated because he has very gaudy stats, and I don't know that Drew Brees is that much, or actually is any worse of a QB than Tom Brady, to be honest. I think they're neck and neck. But now Cooks is moving into a team that has the defense to back him up, and the Patriots can roll out Cooks, Julian Edelman as a number 2 wide receiver, and Chris Hogan as a number 3. You're probably going to see Edelman in the slot a lot, and we all know how dangerous he is in the slot. So that's a huge one for them on offense. And then on defense, they get Coney Iali, who just 2 seasons ago was in a Super Bowl and really played very well there. And all they have to do for that one is they move back 8 picks from the 64th to the 72nd pick, which is ridiculous. They got him for basically nothing, and they just continue to add tools to their arsenal for very cheap.
Man, this deal is just frustrating. That this team just won the Super Bowl. How can the team that just won a Super Bowl continue to make moves and get that much better? Like, of course they're going to do what's best for their own interests, but it just seems so unfair for the rest of the league that, man, it's just frustrating. But
they're going to lose Edelman and replace him with a 23-year-old Cooks who can streak down the line and catch passes like Randy Moss for him.
I mean, I don't think Cooks is that great. I actually think they needed more someone like Brandon Marshall. They need more of that big body because now they just have a bunch of smaller, fast guys. In Edelman, Cooks is another smaller, fast dude. Amendola is the same. Hogan is just their speedster, and he's also not that big. So I feel like they needed more of that big body, which they didn't go after. But I think Cooks is still a pretty significant upgrade, so that's still going to help out their offense a lot, and Tom Brady. I think the bigger deal here was Stephon Gilmore, the cornerback they took from the Bills. This is a guy that I feel like he was a good anchor for that defense last year. That Bills defense overall wasn't very good, but Gilmore really helped them out in shutting down a lot of top wide receivers. And even though people felt like the Pats had Butler and Butler was great, I never really saw him as a number 1 corner. He just doesn't quite have the size for it or the skill. I mean, he had that one amazing Super Bowl play, which solidified his place in history, but that's really it, I think. He's definitely above average. I just don't see him as a top-tier corner.
And I agree with you on Malcolm Butler. I like Butler a lot. He's very he plays very hard and he's scrappy. He kind of reminds me of the name escapes me. Who was that asshole corner who got in a whole bunch of fights with everyone?
Cortland Finnegan?
Yes, Cortland Finnegan. Um, he reminds me of Cortland Finnegan. Not so much of an asshole, but just the same kind of tenacity and the physical play, despite the size. But I don't think he can, due to the lack of size, I think there's a lot of issues that he would have dealing with bigger receivers. Julio in the Super Bowl, he had a number of great plays. I think one of the catch, I want to say that he skied over Butler, and that's just a height thing. You can't teach height. So I think Stephon Gilmore is a good replacement. If they can bring Butler back, that would be even better, because then they would have a top corner rotation.
And
we'll see.
We said we don't see Butler as a top tier corner. The Pats don't treat him like one either. Like, they actually don't give him the number one assignment most of the time. In fact, they almost never do. Against guys like Julio or bigger wide receivers like that, they usually have Logan Ryan, who's actually gone now. But they would have Logan Ryan cover him and then give him a lot of safety help, and then let Malcolm chase after the number 2 guy. So it's clear that the Pats don't value him as a number 1 corner either. So Stephon Gilmore, I think he really fills that role perfectly for this team.
Yeah, and I think overall, it's really unfair. And if you look at big picture, the best team in the league just upgraded their corner spot and the wide receiver spot. So their defense is going to get better probably, and their offense is going to get better probably.
Like, the only thing they lost is Martellus Bennett, really. They lost Martellus Bennett, and I think they signed Dwayne Allen. And Martellus Bennett is the number 2 behind Gronk.
Exactly. So, and now with their additional weapons on offense, they can kind of, more try to save Gronk for the playoffs. Like, they just fucking won the Super Bowl without him. Fuck you guys. Fuck the Patriots. So moving on, rather than go through, all the rest of the deals, I think we should just kind of go one by one and say which deal out of the rest of the deals do you think is the best? And we'll start with the best. We'll start with you, Mike. Out of the rest of the deals, forget the Patriots and Giants. What's the best deal?
I like Eddie Lacy to the Seahawks. It's not a lot of money. I think the terms were like $4 million 1 year, something like that. And a lot of it is based on incentives for weight. It's a low risk move. Eddie Lacy is, he's not that far removed from being a top tier running back. And last season, before he got injured, he was performing well. They just didn't give him a lot of touches. He was very efficient. I think that's a good move. The only other runner-up would be Alshon to the Eagles. That's a 1 year, $9.5 million deal, and a lot of it is based on incentives. It's not a long-term deal, which I think is good for both sides. And the Eagles badly need receiving talent. So those would be my 2 picks for best deal.
You concerned about his weight? I mean, Eddie Lacy was playing really well last year. I think he was averaging 5 yards a carry, which is incredible before he got hurt. But he's playing around like 240 pounds, I think, and now he's up to 267.
I think it's fine. I mean, it's fun to make a lot of fat Eddie jokes, but I think he knows that this is kind of make it or break it. If he doesn't really perform this season, I think his next contract is going to be much smaller, or he'll be kind of on the roster bubble. This is a chance to really prove himself. And if he has a good season, he's setting himself up for a bigger contract, maybe something in the 3-year, $14 million range for his next team.
I think the Eddie Lacy to the Seahawks is a great fit for him too. I guess what my question is, Marshawn Lynch is potentially coming back to play, although not on the Seahawks. He's potentially coming back and playing on the Raiders, and he's actually asking Pete Carroll to be released from the team. So from Marshawn Lynch's perspective, I'm trying to get into his head and seeing what he thought. I think that was a really smart move retiring last year, when he realized that offensive line was absolute garbage and that whoever played there was just going to get crushed play after play. So we saw Procise get hurt. We saw Rawls also get hurt. Like, that was a smart move by Lynch from a career perspective.
I don't think there's any. I think it was smart, but I think that was more of a self-preservation,
Absolutely,
a life type thing than from a career thing. I think the wheels are, I think Marshawn's lost his wheels. He has he's has over 2,000 career carries, couple seasons where he's right at 300 or above 300 carries. And his final season, he only played 7 games before he got injured, averaged under 4 yards per carry. I just don't think he has it in him anymore to be a starting caliber running back.
See, I feel like it's not so much on Marshawn, but more so that Seattle line was just complete garbage and continually declining for several years. So Eddie Lacy has also been known to be an injury-prone running back. So I'm a little worried for him that he's trying to play behind that porous line now. He might just get hurt again.
So do you think that's the best deal, or is there another deal?
I think Kenny clearly doesn't think that's the best deal. What's the best deal, Kenny?
I think my choice for best deal might be a little surprising, but the one I like the most is actually for a division rival for the Eagles. Their signing of Torrey Smith for $3 million a year. I feel like this is something that team really needed. They just needed a speedster, someone to stretch the field. And when you look at speedsters, guys like Deshaun Jackson or Torrey Smith, they don't always get great stats game to game, but they add so much just by stretching the field, just by forcing defenses to play back and actually respect their game, respect the fact that they can take any single throw to the house. And in the past, the Eagles, they didn't have that. No one respected their long ball because their receivers were guys like Aguilar that just couldn't catch shit. Like even perfect throws from Wentz just sailed right through his hands, and it was depressing to watch. It was just depressing to watch that such a nice throw by Wentz, a young QB who has a great long ball, was going completely to waste. And I think Torrey Smith is the perfect fit for that. He's extremely great. It's incredible value. $3 million per year for someone that's such a perfect fit for the team it's awesome. And he's also getting a massive discount because of how awful he played last year in the 49ers. But that wasn't entirely on Torrey Smith. I'd say that was more due to the QBs there. So that would be my choice for best deal.
Yeah, I'm on the same path as you, Kenny, but I'm gonna go with Alshon Jeffrey as the best deal. But I agree with you. Like, that's the reason why, because the Eagles at wide receiver were such a shit show for the past few years with Aguilar and Matthews and whoever else Carson Wentz had to throw to. But I think either one, you can say Alshon Jeffrey or Torrey Smith. Torrey Smith, you're right, as in they bought really low on him. But I think Alshon Jeffrey is the better player, and he's only 27, and I think I don't know. I'm a little afraid of the Eagles. Their weapons on offense. As long as Carson Wentz takes his next step, he has the targets now. They went out and got some receivers for him, and I think their offense is just way better now. And those, I think their receiving core, those are the best deals that I think any team has made. Where do you think, Ray? What's your best deal?
I'm gonna go with Terrell Pryor to the Redskins, just because the Redskins need a quarterback and wide receivers these days, and he can play both.
That's true. That's very true. How about worst deals, guys? What do you think is the worst deal, Mike?
That honor goes to the San Francisco 49ers and their signing of Kyle Juszkiewicz. That's how you pronounce it, right?
It's Juszczyk.
Juszczyk?
Yeah.
For 4 years, $21 million. The highest paid fullback ever. That's a lot of money in an era where fullbacks, a lot of teams don't even carry a fullback. And at over $5 million average per season, they could get, they can get a great running back, not just a fullback. I can kind of get the rationale. Carlos Hyde is probably their best player, so they can get, some blocking for him, and Jukic Is that how you pronounce it?
Uchik.
Uchik.
He was on the Ravens.
He can, yeah. So he had a lot of good catches last year. He was a weapon for them, but you don't sign fullbacks to $5 million. That's just not a good use of money.
I agree that's a pretty shitty deal, but I feel like it's somewhat understandable if the 49ers are trying to return to a power running game. But I don't think they even have the personnel for that. So I agree that's a pretty shitty deal. But if I were to say worst deal, I would have to say Redskins firing of Scott McCloughan, their former GM. I mean, they fired Scott McCloughan on – this isn't really even a deal. I just think it's the biggest shit show to come out of free agency. But they fire this guy on the first day of free agency. Like, what does that say to your team when you fire your GM on possibly one of the most important days for the front office of the entire year? Like, it's almost like you're telling your entire team that we're completely incompetent and we don't know how to manage you guys. Like, who wants to sign to this team now? Who wants to come to the Redskins? Then they have the whole Kirk Cousins shit show. And they have like all these people that are actually protesting. I don't know if you guys heard about this. They're actually like got Redskins fans protesting in front of their offices.
What about like an actual football deal?
If I had to say actual worst football deal, I guess I would go with Uchik too. I think that's pretty terrible.
Just to spice it up, I'll throw Marcus Wheaton out there. Marcus Wheaton to the Bears.
How much did he get paid? I don't even know.
$6 million, I think, but the guy hasn't proven anything in the league, and he can't catch. So, he's just, I don't know why they're paying anything for this guy. He doesn't have a breakout season yet. I think he's just benefiting off the high-powered offense of the Steelers, and he just got paid
number
to
2 or number 3 for so long now.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But
it's weird.
Along the same lines, Cordell Patterson, I think he can sign with the Raiders. Same thing. He's just super athletic, and he's getting paid now.
He's at least a good kick returner, right? He can do kick and punt returns, so he has some value there on special teams. Maybe they'll convert him over to be like a gunner full time. The Wheaton deal's pretty bad.
If we're talking about shitty wide receiver deals, can we also talk about Robert Woods signing with the Rams for a 5-year deal worth $39 million?
Oh shit! I forgot all about that deal. That is definitely worse than the Kyle Uchik signing.
I don't know if it's worse.
I think it's worse.
Pretty bad though. I mean, this is a Rams team that fucked up miserably last year already. Signing Tavon Austin, but I think they're paying him like $14 million a year or something like that. He's one of the highest paid wide receivers. For a guy that can't catch, like his only job is to be a gadget guy. That's it. That's all he can do, and they paid him that much. And now they're signing Robert Woods for this much. I mean, I think Robert Woods is a decent player. He's a solid number 2, but they're paying him like he should be their number 1 guy, and I don't think he fits that mold at all.
I don't even know that he's a number 2 for a top team. For his career, he's played 4 seasons. He has under 600 yards on 2 of the seasons and under 700 yards on the other 2. About 50 receptions per season. He's not a guy that you should be paying $39 million over 5 years to. Even if the guarantee is $15 million, which is ridiculous. That team has committed themselves to not even mediocrity, to being a shitty team for at least the next 3 seasons.
I mean, I feel like Robert Woods' stats are somewhat understandable since he plays on the run-first Bills, and he was playing behind Sammy Watkins the last 2 years, and before that, I think he was playing behind like Stevie Johnson. So they're decent stats, but this is a Rams team which needs so much more than just a wide receiver. Like that whole offense is complete garbage from top to bottom. You need a higher quality player than someone like Robert Woods to turn that around.
Agreed, definitely. So do we have any other deals that you guys want to talk about, whether it's good, bad, or surprising, or if you want to talk about before we move on to away from the NFL free agency stuff?
I do want to bring up the Mike Glennon deal. I think that was surprising. He got $45 million over 3 years. He's basically signed to be, or he is signed to be the guy, having cut Jay Cutler. That's a lot of money to commit to a guy who has his last career start was like 2-3 seasons ago, and he doesn't have a big body of work. Basically, the Bears are saying, based on these 8 quarters of play, we feel very confident with this guy to be our starting QB. That was a little surprising to me, especially after what just happened with Brock.
Yeah, they have faith in the Mike Glennon, Marcus Wheaton connection.
Yeah, the Bears are a fucking disaster. I'll throw a shout out to Danny Woodhead. Why not? Because he's good in fantasy.
Did he go to the Ravens? I can't remember now.
Went to the Ravens, yeah. But I think that's a solid deal for both sides. Yeah, we'll see how he hangs in Baltimore.
I think my favorite thing about free agency, before we move on, it's not so much an actual deal, but the fact that the Cowboys are losing like half their team. Almost their entire defense is going to be gone. So I'm happy to see that this team, which did so well last year in our division, may be significantly worse off.
Yeah, they could be. So it will be an interesting season upcoming. So we'll move on to our favorite segment. We'll go through some over, under, or properly rated topics, starting with, I know we mentioned it already, but I think we're all really into these weight incentives built into Eddie Lacy's contract with the Seahawks. So what is he currently owing? 260 as of last season?
No, 267 after he met with the Seahawks a couple of days ago.
And the weight incentives are, I guess he has a weigh-in every month, and he gets paid based if he makes the weight or something. I think that they're targeting in the 240s. So what do you guys think? Is weight incentives built into a contract? Is that over, as Kenny you said,
overweighted?
Overweighted? Or do we need weight incentives built into contracts?
Absolutely overweighted. I think this is the one player that actually needs weight incentives built into his contract. This has been a problem for him. He's all about that China food. And if you look at pictures of him from when he was drafted and last year, I think he doubled in size. He's like doubled in mass. So he really needs the incentives to cut down.
Yeah, I agree with Kenny. I think if anything, they should increase the amount of money that he can make by hitting his weight. Right now, he's only making $55,000 for each month that he hits. I think if anything, they should up that to like $500,000 or something. You really give him a motivation to get in line with his target weight. I think in the past, other teams have tried that with similar players with mixed success. I think Eddie Curry, another famous fat Eddie, he had something like that. I heard Jamarcus Russell may have had something like that. I know Shaq had it at one point, but they weren't like big incentives. So I think there's like, whatever, fuck it. If you want to make it stick, you gotta bump up the money.
Yeah, I mean, $55K in relation to his net worth. What is that to us, right? A few hundred a month. If that's the difference between like eating grilled chicken breast every night versus like McDonald's. If I'm really into McDonald's, I'm going to eat McDonald's. Like, I don't care. I don't give a shit. So I think the weight incentive is kind of overrated. What do you think, Ray? Any thoughts?
On what, like weight? I mean,
yeah. Is the weight incentive of $55K enough? Like, is it?
I don't think it matters to Eddie Lacy. He hasn't been able to keep his weight his entire career, so it's not like he's going to start for $50,000. The guy's willing to like lose his NFL career over eating. So Does
Good.
50,000 really matter on a $5 million deal?
Yo, but China.
Yep. Exactly. And so we'll move on. Next topic. We have a lot of shit going on with Lonzo Ball and his dad, LeVar, and Charles Barkley, and talking about how, LeVar can beat Michael Jordan one-on-one or some shit like that. So what do you guys think of Lonzo Ball? Just the entire situation. Is it going to have a harmful effect on his career? And his dad, overall, his presence, is it overrated, underrated, and how is it going to affect him?
Let's
start with Kenny.
I say overrated. I don't know what his dad's doing. I feel like all his comments can only serve to hurt Lonzo Ball's career. Because people are already starting to measure him against Curry just because his dad said that. And there's no way that can help. You can't just live up to these expectations right off the bat. Like, you got to give him time to develop and grow, and he's making it extra difficult for his son. So I think his father's a moron. And then part of me already wants to see the kid fail just to shut up his dad. And that's terrible. No one should want to see a kid fail.
Mike, as the only dad in the group, what are your thoughts on helicopter parenting?
I think it's horribly trashy what he's doing. It's kind of genius in a perverse sense. Because the initial reaction is like, man, that guy's such a douchebag. I hope his son fucking fails. And then you stop and you think about it and you're like, man, I'm a terrible person. I shouldn't be wishing for this kid to fail just because his dad's a dipshit, right? And then that you come full circle and you're like, man, I really want this kid to succeed because his dad is such a dipshit. And I want him to be like a humble kid who works hard, which he seems to be, right? Like, that's the whole narrative. Lonzo Ball is a very humble guy. He's not attached with any of his dad's nonsense. So his dad is setting himself as a contrast. I don't think he's doing it intentionally because he just seems like a dipshit he doesn't have that kind of, it's not like a self-sacrificing thing. But I think long-term it's probably good for Lonzo Ball, as perverse as it sounds.
I think that's the dad in you that helped you see that next step. Where I stopped at LeVar Ball's a dipshit, so I want to see Lonzo Ball fail.
I want to see LeVar Ball fail. I want to see him actually play Charles Barkley and Charles Barkley to just destroy him, not just in basketball but like physically. I really want to see him get destroyed, but it's not fair to hold against Lonzo.
I think as a non-dad, I lack the maturity or the empathy to see that next step where I want to see Lonzo Ball succeed despite his...
Yeah. No, I agree with you guys. LeVar Ball. But I think we can't judge Lonzo based on his dad, but his dad's here to stay, and we have 2 more kids coming through. So he's going to be around for a while. We'll move on to the next topic. March Madness as the best time of the year, as we hear all the time on on ESPN and sports talk shows, where the first Thursday and Friday and the next week when we have the Sweet 16, it's a great sports time. We get to see games all day and drink at the bar all day. What are your thoughts on the best time of the year in sports? We'll start with you, Mike.
Overrated. Do I really care about seeing pasty, unathletic white guys pass the ball around the perimeter for 30 seconds and then jack up a bad shot? No, I don't want to see that shit. I want to see like real basketball. And I don't get time off for March Madness. I do a bracket, and that's about it. If you ask me, the best time of the year is either in December when NBA is just kind of starting to kick in and you're in the middle of football and it's winter, so no one really expects you to do work. That's the best time of the year.
I'm going to say properly rated. I feel like it's harder for us to appreciate March Madness given that we went to a college that doesn't prioritize sports. Like, we never got into the whole following a college team thing. Like, that's just not the atmosphere that we grew up in. So I'm going to say properly rated. Like, I still enjoy creating a bracket, betting on the games, but I guess I don't appreciate it quite at the same level as a lot of the other sports analysts.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Kenny. It's properly rated. Just because majority of the country is in everywhere else besides like the big cities, they're really into their college sports teams, especially in the South and the Midwest. And just because we can't appreciate that doesn't mean overall it's not the best time. And I kind of see it. If you have the day off, I mean, that'd be great if we could just all take the day off and just sit at a bar and just watch sports all day. And there's no other time where you kind of have that, even during NFL season, you already have off like Saturday, Sunday and what. So I think it's really fun time, and there's so much gambling involved that it makes us interested as well. So it's a good time. What do you think, Ray?
It's absolutely one of the best. The first 2 days, absolutely one of the best days of the year. If you think of a pyramid, I would put it up with the Super Bowl Sunday, the Kentucky Derby, and maybe the New Year's Day bowls. But college basketball, I mean, to Mike's point, it's an acquired taste. I think some people swear by college basketball, some people swear by the NBA, some people like women's basketball. So it's really what you prefer.
Right, I think I'm the only one that watches women's basketball.
Yeah. So yeah, I think you're out of the loop on this one, Mike. You're just a hater.
I am a hater.
Next up, we had an incident yesterday in the Lakers Bucks game where the Bucks, Greg Monroe, well, it started with a flagrant foul on I think D'Angelo Russell or Brandon Ingram by Malcolm Brogdon, and we had a scuffle, and Greg Monroe came out, and ultimately a Bucks coach or assistant coach or something came out on the field and shoved Brandon Ingram. And then Luke Walton went off after the game and said, if we should hire a guy to kind of like be a bouncer who could shove players. And he was really upset and defended his boys. Do you think NBA fights in general will go with overrated, underrated, properly rated? Mike?
I was improperly rated because I think most people don't, they don't put too much emphasis in NBA fights. It's a bunch of millionaires shoving each other. You rarely see people swing like, the Ron Artest and the Matt Barnes and the Kendrick Perkins and the Baccas. They're kind of a dying breed. The fights these days are not real fights. I do think I agree with Luke Walton's comments overall. If you actually watch the tape, Greg Monroe shoving someone or like half shoving, half mushing someone in the throat, that should be an ejection. And it should be a much stiffer fine than a couple of shoves from some other guys. And I also agree, if you're a member of the staff, you got to be more professional, and you can't be shoving players at all, right? You should, if anything, you should be like wrapping them up, hugging them, stopping them from starting the fight or escalating. But you can't be putting your hands on players. And I think Luke Walton bringing up that point, he's absolutely right. Right? We've seen it happen in football a couple times with a couple of assistant coaches, or actually coaches just getting onto the field and tripping players or pushing players and stuff like that. And in all those instances, the organization has gotten severely fined or punished. So I would expect the same to happen for the Bucks.
I would say underrated. Luke Walton is a boss. And I love that he stands up for his players like that. Because he acknowledged that his players are wrong as well, and that they shouldn't be shoving people or getting into arguments and fights. But at the same time, he understands that there's no situation where that staffer from the Bucks should have been even on the floor, let alone shoving one of the Lakers players. And Luke Walton's basically saying that NBA, you better do something about this, or I'm going to escalate the situation. And I think that's a boss-ass comment. I love it. And if we get more fights in the NBA, I was actually rewatching the Malice in the Palace this morning. That was amazing. There were some amazing fights coming out of that. Like there's one scene where you see Ron Artest after he gets pulled out of the stands, some fan runs up to him, and Ron Artest just punches him in the face.
Yeah.
No,
Punches him in the face.
That's
And
not
then
Artest. That was Jermaine O'Neal.
No, you see Ron Artest punch him in the face first. Then a second later, Ron Artest gets pulled back. The fan's still standing there. And then you see Jermaine O'Neal slide in with another punch, which knocks the dude down. That was amazing.
That guy was so lucky that he slid, or that guy might literally be dead.
Yeah. I think NBA fights in general are going to be overrated. I don't think it's always a shoving match because the players know they don't want to really get hurt over fighting. This is millions and millions of dollars they have on the line. Why would you risk it by like trying to fight someone and get your ass beat? Anyway, Ray, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think a lot of talk about NBA fights, but at the end of the day, Brandon Ingram just needs to bulk up. I mean, that's all I really care about. He's 6'9", 190 pounds. You can't. I mean, no one should be able to shove you that easily.
Agreed, definitely.
Hey,
Next topic we have.
How much do you think Kevin Durant weighs now? Is he above 230 yet?
220, 210.
I mean, I'm sure. I'm sure, Mike, you're heavier than Brandon Ingram at this point, and you're like a foot shorter.
Yeah. He needs to bulk up. Anyway, we'll move on. Our next topic will be the Miami Heat, who's on fire right now. Their prospects for the NBA playoffs. Can they make any? What is that? What's the cliche? Like make some noise. Make some noise. Can they make some noise in the playoffs? Mike.
I don't think so.
Or Kenny, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm not Mike. But I don't think so. They just lost Dion Waiters, who I feel like was a pretty big part of their team and their scoring. So I didn't see them as a very dangerous team to begin with. And with that injury, they're so much worse off that I just don't think so.
Yeah. Mike?
I don't think they're going to make any noise, but it's not really their fault. I think they're going to get the Cavs in their first matchup, and they're just going to get slaughtered. If they're lucky, though, they'll pass the Bucks and they'll play the Celtics, potentially the Wizards. If they do, I think if Waiters comes back, they can bring those series to 6. And I don't think they'll be an easy out. But if they play the Cavs, they're going to get massacred. So I would say overrated. For a underrated, though, I would say the Denver Nuggets, who are kind of in the same boat, really been heating up. I don't think they're going to beat the Warriors, but I think they'll take a game off the Warriors.
All right. I agree. The Heat will – I don't think they'll take a game off the Cavs, but they could put up 2 or even 3 against the Celtics. So I think I think they're not dangerous as in they can knock off a team, but they'll put up a fight. Next topic we had Bill Simmons and Zach Lowe reunited on Bill Simmons' podcast this week. So we'll go with their friendship and their podcasts together. Is it overrated, underrated, or properly rated? We'll start with Ray this time, since I'm sure he listened to the podcast.
I do. I think it's great that ESPN lets their talent go on the Bill Simmons podcast. But I've been fairly impressed with Bill Simmons' guest lineup so far. After the NFL season, when he just did like Joe House and Cousin Sal twice a week. I was impressed with. He had Steve Ballmer on yesterday, Zach Lowe, and I forget who else he had on recently, but just a very good.
Kerr, I think, right?
Yeah, he had Steve Kerr. The Luke Walton was very well done. So just a very good set of guests, and we should really step it up, guys.
We're almost there.
Almost there.
Mike, did you listen to the podcast?
I'm going to say underrated. So not only was Zach Lowe on Bill Simmons' podcast, Bill Simmons was also on the Low Post yesterday, the day before. So it's good that they're getting the opportunity to work together again. And I think Simmons, for a really long time after he left ESPN, he was really very bitter, and he didn't not only that, but he didn't really watch basketball. You could tell based on his commentary that he really only watched, the Warriors and Cavs and like a couple of other big teams, and that he didn't really have a sense for, what was really going on. He didn't have a good pulse. Recently, in the past couple of weeks, I think he has he put out some actual quality articles and some stuff that kind of indicates that he's taken a step back from like the running the project, and more in terms of what actually made him famous, which is watching sports and making commentary. And I think Zach Lowe is probably a big influence on that. So I like that. And I think Zach Lowe brings out the best in Simmons.
I think I'll preface my comments by saying that I didn't listen to the podcast, so I'll stay properly rated. I guess I kind of stopped paying attention to Bill Simmons because I felt like after he left ESPN, he was just so resentful and negative that I didn't really want to listen to him a lot of the times. And seeing him work with Zach Lowe again, or hearing about it at least, it sounds like he's returning to his roots, what he actually did, and maybe starting to move past his whole grudge with ESPN.
Yeah, you should give it a shot, Kenny. It's improved in the last few weeks. He had Kevin Durant, Isaiah Thomas, Steve Ballmer.
Wait, which Isaiah Thomas?
Celtics.
I think Bill Simmons, I don't know, I can't get back on it. I think he's overrated now. He's just so much. First of all, during the entire NFL season, it was just, his boys on this podcast, and it was just so boring, and I couldn't stand it anymore. Like him and Joe House agree on everything. Bill Simmons says something, and Joe House just agrees, and there's just nothing redeeming about listening to his podcast. I feel like I don't get any knowledge of it, anything. And Bill Simmons is just way too emotional based. Like Zach Lowe, that's why Zach Lowe is a good balance for him, because Zach brings stats and facts and like actual analysis. And Bill is more like, oh, but you have to see this in person, man. And when I sat courtside, I heard Chris Paul yell at Blake Griffin, and it was I could tell that in his eyes, he was going to win the game, and then he made the shot, and they won. And I knew it because I saw it in his eyes. Fuck you, Bill Simmons. Not everyone can sit courtside to the Clippers game. And it's just not, I don't know, there's nothing redeeming about that to me. I just think I don't think
Simmons winning everything. He doesn't have anything of value to say. Zach Lowe kind of pushes and pulls him to talk about actual sports.
Yeah, this is like the '86 Celtics, man. And when I saw Larry do this, and I can also relate this to the Hoosiers or some shitty movie that no one's watched because his eye, come on, let's stop with the movie comparisons. But overall, I'll still listen to his podcast and read his articles. So I'm a fucking idiot, but I have a lot to complain about. But I still listen to his shit. I don't know why. Last but not least, we'll go with Chandler from Friends.
Underrated.
Underrated.
He's the best character in the show.
Kenny.
Best character in any show. So underrated
really?
for me.
Is he really your favorite character, TV character of all time?
I think he's one of the better characters. Everyone that watches Friends is always going to say that he's their favorite because he's the most relatable. He's the only one that doesn't have any clear flaws or really obvious, ridiculous flaws. So everyone always says they relate to Chandler, and it makes him just the most fun character.
Do you have a Chandler impression?
Could I be wearing any more clothes?
Oh, God. Oh, God. Mike.
I'm going to go with properly rated. I think he gets the recognition he deserves as being by far the best of the Friends. I think a lot of times I want to punch half the Friends cast. Chandler and Joey. I would say Chandler, then Joey, then Phoebe, and then the other three. That's a clear hierarchy.
Yeah, I think Ross is probably the worst. But Chandler's good. I think he's properly rated. What about you, Ray?
I didn't watch Friends, so good luck, guys.
You never seen Friends?
No, I mean I watched it. I didn't care to rate the characters.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I haven't seen all the episodes, but yeah, I think from what I've seen, Chandler would be my favorite if I saw all the episodes. So that concludes our episode 12. Thanks for joining us. And next week we'll probably dive into like some other March Madness and NBA stuff. But thanks for listening. Signing off from Queens, New York is me, Kenny, Mike, and Ray. Thanks.